The term mugshot means a special kind of photo. You've probably seen them before, but you just didn't know they were called that. In short, these are the same full face and profile shots that are taken by the police after an arrest. This gallery of Wild West photos features some of the most notorious criminals of the late 1800s and early 1900s, as well as details of their daring exploits. Criminals in the Wild West often found themselves in harsh and merciless conditions. One of the most notorious prisons was Wyoming Frontier Prison. This building, built in 1901, lacked basic amenities such as electricity and running water, making life inside exceptionally difficult. The prison was notorious for its harsh conditions, including a torture chamber where prisoners were regularly beaten and flogged. Bob Younger was a member of the infamous Younger Brothers gang that terrorized the Midwest. Bob Younger, along with his brothers Cole and Jim, committed a series of daring robberies. Even at the turn of the century, many Wild West prisons continued to tolerate barbaric practices. For example, the Wyoming Frontier Prison closed only in 1981, and over its long history it has held about 13,500 prisoners, including 11 women. Another notorious institution in Wyoming was known for its cramped conditions. 2 prisoners were held in 5-foot-wide cells and were subject to a strict no-talking rule. In September 1866, John Ellis was accused of stealing horses. Wild West prisons housed some of the most notorious criminals in American history, criminals who thrived on the lawless frontier. The photos in the gallery above depict such famous personalities as the Younger Gang, a group of brothers Cole, Bob, and Jim Younger, who became famous for a series of robberies in Missouri, Texas, and nearby states. The Younger brothers eventually joined forces with another pair of criminal brothers, Frank and Jesse James, to form the legendary James Younger Gang. Together, they organized daring robberies and avoided capture for many years. In May 1925, Mary Shannon was sentenced to 2 years in prison in Nebraska for causing damage to society. Charismatic leader Jesse James wrote letters to sympathetic newspaper editors, portraying the gang as modern-day Robin Hoods who rob the rich to help the poor. However, their criminal activities came to an abrupt end during an unsuccessful bank robbery in Northfield, Minnesota, in September 1876. Faced with numerical superiority and armed townspeople, the gang was forced to flee. While the James brothers managed to escape and continue their criminal activities, the Younger brothers were captured by a determined squad in a nearby forest. Emmett Dalton was known as a former gunman and the younger brother of the Dalton Gang, which robbed trains and banks in the late 1800s. The concept of modern photography originated in Belgium in the 1840s, when police began photographing prisoners to ensure their identification in the event of a repeat crime after release. By 1857, this practice had spread to New York City, where police regularly photographed suspects and displayed the photos in public galleries to enlist citizens' help in catching criminals. By the 1860s, such photographs had become commonplace on wanted posters across America. Initially, the now standard front and profile view format was not used for photographs. This two-projection format was first used in 1888 by French policeman Alphonse Bertillon, which was a significant achievement in the field of criminal identification. In March 1931, Jake Folan sneaked into Stubblefield's chicken coop to steal some poultry. He was arrested after a homemade alarm system installed by the owners alerted them to his intrusion. Juanita McCamey, 20, was arrested in San Diego and charged with criminal conspiracy after participating in a public labor protest in 1912. Goldie Williams, aka Meg Murphy, was arrested in Nebraska for vagrancy on January 29, 1898. In the photo, Williams looks rebellious after being arrested. Maddie Brown was sent to Nebraska State Prison on September 25, 1917, for pickpocketing. She spent a year in prison. Elv Lytle was sentenced to 12 to 15 years in prison in Nebraska for bank robbery. An unidentified inmate of the Washington State Correctional Facility, which is part of the Monroe Correctional Complex. In 1901, J.P. Robinson was arrested in Nebraska for organizing a fraud in which he bought beer for Mexican dollars, which looked very similar to American dollars, although the Mexican currency was worth half as much. An unidentified Omaha police officer holds Herbert Cochran in a headlock while photographing him in November 1899. Cochran was arrested on charges of burglary. When Wyoming authorities briefly caught notorious criminal Butch Cassidy and took this picture for stealing horses in 1894, his most notorious crimes were yet to come. After his release from prison, he formed the Wild Bunch, recruited the Sundance Kid, and continued robbing banks and trains throughout the Wild West. Cassidy eventually met his end in a dramatic shootout in Bolivia. An unknown boy is arrested for car theft, despite the fact that he is only 11 years old. Jim Younger was one of 3 younger brothers who robbed banks and trains in the Midwest. George Leonard, an accountant from Omaha, was arrested for burglary on December 23, 1901. In 1901, 22-year-old Nora Courier was known to the police as Red Nora. She was arrested on March 31st of the same year for stealing a horse. Frank Carter, known as the Omaha Sniper, was finally arrested in February 1926. He was found guilty of murdering 2 people, although he confessed to 43 other murders, many of which could not be proven. His lawyers used the insanity defense in court, but he was executed a year later. Cole Younger was the eldest of the 3 younger brothers who terrorized the Midwest by robbing banks and trains. Dave Marshall was suspected of stealing pocket items or women's handbags. An unidentified inmate of the Washington State Correctional Institution, also known as the Monroe Correctional Complex. In November 1916, Stephen Schock was sentenced to 2 years in prison in Nebraska for embezzlement on a particularly large scale. According to prison records, he enlisted in the U.S. Army shortly after his release in 1918 to serve in World War I. Unknown perpetrator, 35 years old. His photograph and measurements were taken on April 10, 1912. On April 12, 1900, H.K. Adams was arrested in Omaha for blackmail. William Lee was arrested in 1919 after Prohibition was passed in Nebraska for bootlegging, an illegal business transporting alcoholic beverages. George Ray's photograph, taken in the 1890s, is unique in that it shows a prisoner smiling. The description on the back of John Jordan's photo describes him as a brothel pimp and a drug dealer. He was arrested by the St. Louis police. Bertha Leiby was known as one of the most famous pickpockets in the Midwest. She targeted well-dressed men, ideally those with diamond lapel brooches, bumping into them and pretending to faint as she fell into their arms. This trick earned her the nickname Bertha the Swoon. Her scam stopped when she was arrested in May 1903. In 1899, Frank L. Dinsmore was arrested in Buffalo County, Nebraska, for the double murder of his wife and the owner of their boarding house. In February 1914, Alberto Interciego was sentenced to between 1 and 20 years in Nebraska State Prison for wounding. His thick mustache and hair were shaved off before the second photo was taken. Jim Ling was arrested on June 3, 1898, for running an opium den. Charlie Jones, alias Williams, was arrested in Missouri in 1858 for pickpocketing. While working with another inmate named Ruby Fox, Myrtle Hetrick escaped from the Nebraska Correctional Institution for Women by car. Ruby Fox teamed up with Myrtle Hetrick to escape from a correctional facility for women in Nebraska. Minnie Bradley was arrested for stealing from a man in Omaha on December 13, 1902. Charles Martin was among 3 robbers who blew up a safe in a bank vault in Sheridan, Missouri, on February 15, 1898. Thomas Whitney was arrested by Omaha police in December 1915. A fraudster, Whitney earned money by advertising his clairvoyance and palmistry abilities in local newspapers. One disgruntled customer complained about him to the authorities, which led to accusations of collecting money under false pretenses. Lola Lopez was arrested after her partner, Cesareo Estrada, robbed and killed a man at a Knoll rooming house in Sidney, Nebraska, on January 9, 1922. The couple escaped, but were caught in Colorado. During the trial, Lopez protested her innocence through an interpreter, but admitted that she knew about the murder. She served a little more than 2 years. If you love vintage photographs and want to immerse yourself in the atmosphere of the past, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Here you will find unique snapshots, interesting stories, and captivating facts about celebrities and events that have left their mark in history. Support us with a like, so we can continue sharing this amazing collection with you.